So what is this? Why these goggles are everywhere? Interesting. Let's watch it. By the channel Reloy.
Quadnods, panos, four eyes, whatever name you know them by.
I guess I never thought about it, but are they even actually useful? Like, is there a point to have your four goggles?
These goggles have become a cultural icon. A character donning a pair of quads tells us more about their lethality and tactical experience than entire minutes of exposition.
Not so.
However, these goggles may have found a home in Tier 1 ground ops, but they didn't start there. What are their origins? Which depictions in media get them right and which get them wrong? What brought them their legendary status as the fighter jet of tactical eyewear? And are four eyes really better than two? This is the L3 Harris GPNVG Comprehensive.
History of the tech? I do wonder why there's four sides and how it works.
In 1975, the U.S. Army Aviation Center in Dale County, Alabama, kicked off the NVG program, receiving 4 pairs of AN/PVS-5 goggles.
That looks literally like Oculus Rift.
In order to understand variations on night vision technology, we'll take a minute crash course. In simplest terms, image intensifier tubes work by taking invisible spectrum light, using it to excite electrons, amplifying these electrons through a series of intensifying channels, and catching them on a screen of phosphor. The end result goggles.
That's why you have
This challenge came with an inherent problem. Increasing FOV could only happen at the expense of resolution. Because each tube has a fixed number of pixels or picture elements, when spread over a larger field of view, the angular subtense per pixel increases, meaning the larger the FOV, the lower the resolution.
Okay.
A trade-off that
the way it's explained sounds confusing, but I think we all kind of get it with games, right? We've all messed with FOV and, you know, subsequent resolutions.
So we're very specifically not willing to make. The solution was found in the PNVG's eventual design. Rather than increase the size of the tubes, 4 tubes were integrated, with the 2 center goggles producing the standard 40 degrees, and the 2 left and right channels creating a 30-degree increase each. The user's effective field of view now increased by 160%, taking NVGs from a standard monocular 40 to a panoramic 100 degrees. Early concepts were integrated into pilots' helmets within the heads-up display, and were extremely low profile to allow a pilot to retain the PNVG upon ejection. The initial goal had been achieved. The concept of a PNVG had become a reality. The question now was, would it work?
1998.
In
the year I was born.
1998, concept designs of the PNVG had been shipped and tested. The results were clear. Engineered for balance and comfort, and using the same tubes as currently fielded NVGs, the visual accuracy, gains, and weight distribution of PNVGs were at least comparable to standard F4949 goggles.
I actually wonder, yeah, like, what is actually the range? Like, how bad was the resolution before that they meant? Because, you know, the footage just showed didn't really look that great. Is that supposed to be the upgraded version?
Of course, in the key metric, field of view, they outshone every competition. Designated ANVIS 10, they were put into production, and crews of the AC-130 gunship, A-10 Thunderbolt, MC-130 Combat Talon, and C-17 Globemaster all eventually fielded ANVIS 10. In the air, the advantage of PNVGs were deemed worthy of their few drawbacks. But how would they perform on the ground?
2002.
A trial in March to April 2002 took place at Fort Benning, Georgia, with the objective: analyze just how big a part field of view plays in a shooter's ability to acquire and eliminate targets. The results were actually unexpected. There appeared to be little to no improvement in target detection times between standard 40-degree goggles and the new 95-degree panos. What the panos did improve was the number of targets the participants were able to detect, especially those at close range.
Makes sense.
These tests, in retrospect, failed in one key issue, what I'll call the peripheral vision problem. Human vision is broken into several parts. Foveal vision, the area of your vision you use to focus. Look directly at an object, and your vision and mental attention will be focused on said object, and everything to the sides will sort of fade into obscurity. Peripheral vision is most useful for detecting movement or noticing changes in contrast. Our eyes have evolved to see a predator moving quickly in the underbrush, or notice a camouflage threat even out of the corner of our eye. This 2002 trial used static low-contrast targets with no engagement cues, features that are incompatible with peripheral vision, the one part of our vision that the PNVG was designed to improve. Hence, why target detection times were essentially the same between 40 and 90-degree nods.
I see.
But in every case, more targets were found by the shooters wearing those panoramic NVGs. Essentially, this test, while flawed, proved that panos weren't necessarily...
I mean, sometimes it just makes sense, yeah, like, you have more field of vision, so you see more stuff. Did we really need a test for that?
really beneficial in every ground operation scenario. It proved that they were beneficial in one key use case, a use case which in the early 2000s was growing more and more recognized as a tactical necessity: room clearing.
What game is this?
As early as 2005, we have evidence of special operations groups fielding the Anvis 10 on deployments. But while Anvis 10 was viable on the ground, it wasn't made for it. It was finicky, difficult to customize, and wasn't designed with the ruggedness required of a true ground application NVG. Its successor, the GP-NVG, was. While its development and production is still shrouded from civilian eyes, as it is still being made to this day, we can only gather that every problem with Anvis 10 was studied and ironed out by L3 Warrior systems. Gone was the low profile needed for aircraft ejection.
Although it works though, because, you know, I thought it was like maybe kind of like a VR headset where like you, like the place where you look in is like basically stuck to your face. But yeah, it looks like, you know, the way they were showing it with the guy on his helmet, it's like there's like a few centimeters between the eye and the actual like goggle. So it's more like you're looking at a screen in front of you rather than like having like a full-on, you know, like a VR set where like it just blackens everything around you. So like you're really just looking at the screen. But like the way they're showing it is like it's still like in front of your eyes like this. So I feel like you can still look left and right to see outside of the helmet. And I feel like they would kind of distract you, no?
And introduced was a rugged, fully modular system with better performance in extreme temperatures and maintenance and customization in mind. While its existence wasn't entirely hidden, most members of the public came in contact with the GP-NVG through the December 2012 film Zero Dark 30.
It was real. I remember that movie. I've seen it. Woke up.
Released just barely a year and a half after the operation itself, it is probably the first depiction of an actual event in which the GP-NVG was definitively used. The film made a permanent impression upon audiences, and firmly set in stone a new visual and tonal depiction of American Special Operations personnel and tactics in a way comparable to depictions of Delta Force in 2001's Black Hawk Down. It's no surprise that they continue to hold a place of significance aesthetically.
Request open, yeah.
Surprisingly, while Zero Dark 30 certainly cemented the Quadnods into mainstream audiences' heads, it was not actually their first media depiction. 2012's Medal of Honor Warfighter released 2 months before Zero Dark 30.
Damn, this game is forgotten. I liked it. Like, some people say this is the game that killed Medal of Honor, and we kind of know that, you know, by the late 2000s, Medal of Honor was already kind of dying. Like, most of the games weren't really selling that much anymore. You know, Medal of Honor had not yet, like, you know, kind of like moved on from like the old vibe, kind of like Call of Duty did, right? And Warfighter was their attempt at that. It was a game in Afghanistan. And it was a good game. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the campaign. I never really played the multiplayer. But it's kind of sad though. Like, I actually like that game, but I think no one really cared. I remember like really playing it a couple times on PS3. Last video in the year of Transformers series. Not gonna promise I'm gonna watch it. I have other videos, but maybe.
Characters using GP-NVGs in several instances. The game relied heavily on direct input from several active duty Navy SEALs, including one of the members of DevGru or SEAL Team 6, involved in the aforementioned Neptune Spear, and its entire visual style reflects this attention to detail heavily. Fascinatingly, several Navy SEALs were reprimanded and punished for leaking classified Navy information to the developers of Warfighter. It's possible that the proliferation of tech like the GP-NVG in the modern US military was one of these details.
You know, operators used to be limited to a narrow field of view. Now, with near full field of view night vision, we can fight at night the same way we would during the day.
However, Warfighter was stuck in an uncomfortable position, lacking the visual or tonal cohesion of the previous year's Battlefield 3, and released just 1 month before the highly anticipated...
That's probably what it was, yeah. Again, like, I've never heard anyone really mention Warfighter. Like, it's a game that's so forgotten. And maybe it's nostalgia because it's already been like a good 10 years at least. And but yeah, I enjoyed it at the time. I still definitely enjoyed Battlefield 3 more. Like, Battlefield 3 is just epic. Not the story though. The story of 3 is kind of dumb. but the multiplayer is legendary. Black Ops 2 though, meh.
Call of Duty Black Ops 2, Warfighter failed to find a niche and was quickly forgotten by most, as well as its surprisingly forward-thinking aesthetic notes. While panos have become synonymous with the going dark tactical aesthetics of the 20-teens Call of Duty Modern Warfare series revival, they actually made their first appearance in 2013's Call of Duty Ghosts, a title at the time hated by many for its tonal departure from the beloved Modern Warfare franchise, but which actually depicted military technology more accurately in many instances, at least visually. While Ghosts contains the only accurate model of GPNVGs in the Call of Duty franchise, they exist in the game as a purely aesthetic tacked-on addition. Ghosts, in many ways one of the unappreciated godfathers of the tactical aesthetic, does this in almost every instance, very accurately modeling real military tech being used and presented in entirely inaccurate, over-the-top Hollywood scenarios.
Of course.
6 years and Call of Duty titles later, and Modern Warfare 2019's Clean House mission made waves in the shooter community. Clearly influenced by Zero Dark 30, the mission forced players for the first time in the series into a confined, target-rich space, where enemies or non-combatants could be around any small corner, through closed doors, under beds, or behind hostages. While visually striking, the mission actually doesn't depict GPNVGs at all. The model is wrong. The visual effects on screen don't accurately reflect third-generation green or white phosphor tubes either, but again, these are some sci-fi quad tubes, not GPNVGs. Clean House was, however, for all intents and purposes, the first curated sequence in modern FPS gaming in which characters used quad nods in the exact—
I'm guessing you're gonna get to that game Ready or Not, which is a game I've really been wanting to play. I'm gonna guess in that game they have like accurate stuff for that.
Situation that they are designed for. The Call of Duty franchise continues to show characters wearing GPNVGs or quad-tube NVGs, but aside from certain sequences that directly echo Zero Dark 30, without designing their depictions in ways which match their real-life use case. Media, whether games or otherwise, repeatedly falls into this trap, creating characters wearing or using the famous nods, but in scenarios that don't make sense for their use, in brightly lit environments, or perhaps in wide-open spaces. Oftentimes, the GPNVGs are modified, given more tubes or maybe cameras or illuminators, taking that tactical strangeness to the maximum. Besides Zero Dark 30, as far as live-action media goes, the short film SCP Dollhouse is one of the few pieces of media depicting GPNVGs being used in the environment they are most accustomed for, an extremely tight and hostile space. The short gets points from me as well for two reasons. Actually depicting the operators activating and deactivating their goggles depending on the surrounding light level, and presenting actual deep darkness requiring the use of nods in the first place.
Target is no longer present.
2 games attempt to specifically depict GPNVGs in a realistic manner. 2018's Ground Branch is most successful in depicting 2 aspects, the variations on the goggle and the differences between it and other devices. Ground Branch is the only game which allows players to choose between the real variations of GPNVGs, either black or tan housing, and between green and white phosphor lenses.
That's cool.
Green-colored phosphor was most common in Gen 3 tubes for many years, because green is the wavelength our eyes are most sensitive to in low-light environments.
That's what it was.
White phosphor is both easier on the eyes and aids in target acquisition. Human eyes, it seems, actually have an easier time detecting contrast and color on the black and white than the green wavelength.
No, I did see it on stream, it was the other in stream.
The only game to attempt a depiction of the view through a pair of quad nods, the center monocular 40 degrees of the 2 center tubes, and the binocular 30 on both sides.
Yeah.
Because of the game's map and encounter design, it accurately depicts the use case for GPNVGs as well. When you're in a pitch black, tight, and visually complex environment, where detecting slight movements in the peripheral could mean life or death, having those extra tubes is everything. Top.
Nice.
Good show.
Very nice.
AI in this game detect light in the visible spectrum, meaning that they will be alerted by white light or visible lasers. An NV user will thusly be able to observe or sight them without being noticed. Being able to detect a threat can be as important as not letting the threat detect you first. The game is also one of the few which attempts to depict the drawbacks of using nods. Magnified optics are rendered useless, for example. Ground Branch is, however, like every other game I've mentioned, a game wherein one is simply given or can choose to wear GPNVGs. Only one game depicts an important aspect of quads in real life: their prohibitively high cost. A pair of GPNVGs on the civilian market will run you over $40,000 US. Even knockoffs, custom kits, or newly arising competitor quads will be impossible to acquire for under 5 figures at bare minimum, often just for the housing itself. Escape from Tarkov, released in 2016, is the only game in which the GPNVG is both the highest quality image intensifier and the most expensive. Because you're competing with other human beings rather than just AI in Tarkov, having 95 degrees of night vision provides a significant advantage in night combat. While the game doesn't add the on-screen visual effect of the 4 tubes, the maximum field of view in Escape from Tarkov is 95 degrees, so the GPNVGs filling your screen with night vision is technically correct. There are 2 issues with Tarkov's depiction, however. They aren't expensive enough for the game's setting, around 1200 USD instead of over 40, meaning that they appear quite commonly on skilled players. More importantly, they don't limit the player's use of long-range optics, scopes, and LPVOs. Since low FOV nods in Tarkov, including those with
like 99% of games don't get it right,
PVS-14, cover the screen with black, the GPNVGs are the only nods in Tarkov which give the player full FOV while wearing night vision. Rather than a specific tool for short-range engagements, the nods become a straight buff to nighttime ops in every case.
See him on the road. He's dead. Killed him.
If games in the future want to depict GPNVGs as accurately as possible, meshing the approaches these 2 games take...
I think they don't. I was just gonna say, I think they don't care, right? You know, maybe some will, you know, like, there's a lot more, like, indie military shooter being made, who literally have, like, a super passion about making everything, like, super accurate to reality. But if you're talking about, like, most of the massive release, I don't think they care that much. Like, they just want something that looks cool.
As well as a more accurate depiction of night vision in general would be the answer. Accurately depict the visual effects of quad tube night vision, the overlapping FOVs, the inability to use ranged optics, as well as in games of the player economy, the unbelievably high price tag. If GPNVGs provided a huge advantage replicating their actual intended use case rather than simple aesthetics, and were so rare that getting your hands on one felt like an endgame moment, that'd increase their cool factor more than the visual effect ever could. Cool factor might be the most important thing. GPNVGs are the holy grail of night vision tech, not because they're the most rounded out device, the one with the most features, the most widely used, or even the newest or most advanced. They're famous because they feel important. Their rarity, their complexity, is what makes them so instantly recognizable. They're a scalpel, a curated tool
to be fun,
for a
not realistic
specific application.
It depends, yeah.
Humanity
it really depends.
has always had a fundamental, primal fear of the dark. GPNVGs give us the one advantage that we lack in nature, turning a human being into the first.
Okay, that sounds like a monster.
I hope you learned
pretty
something.
interesting.
And subscribe if you haven't. I'll catch you soon.
It definitely learned something. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'd seen them before in games, but I never really thought about it. It's one of those things where, like, you know, you kind of know that a lot of games, you know, a lot of the equipment, even the guns you might use, like, it's very possible that they're not very realistic in the way they are represented. But you see that as, like, a casual, you don't really know, right? Like, I don't know if this gun sounds right. I don't know if the reloading animation is right. I don't know if those goggles are actually used in the right way. It's one of those things where you don't think about it too much, right? So it makes you wonder, yeah, like, in most of those games, how many things are wrong that you never thought about, but, like, you realize that most of it is actually wrong. It must be something. It must be something. So pretty interesting video. I liked it. I liked it. Here's the link. Thank you. Very interesting. Okay. Well, I would say that's good.